What is up, YouTube family? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, then it's just welcome to my channel. Now welcome back. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button because you will not be disappointed unless you just don't have good taste. And if that's the case, I can't even relate. So I don't even know where to begin to help you out with that. And for everybody else, y'all, we got a lot of things to get into today. This case was brought to my attention by one of my neighbors, and I had not heard of this person beforehand, which I'm shocked. Honestly, like I said, there's a lot to unpack with this guy here. So without further ado, let's just get right into his story. Let me also preface this by saying, because you know
how you girls like to tussle.
When my version of events do not coincide with the scripted Netflix series that you have watched, it should go without saying, but it doesn't for some. A lot of these shows that you watch are based on true events, meaning that it takes some of the truth and add a whole bunch of fiction from a team of writers that they have hired. And most of what you are seeing is the product of the team of writers' imagination. Also, really quick before I get into today's video, shout out to everybody who was a part of the birthday live stream, like virtual meet and greet. It was really fun. I did not expect all of y'all to just crowd the queue like that. I think the queue only holds like 10 people. And so you have to wait on somebody to drop out to, then come in. The queue stayed at 10 the entire night. I thought at the most that I would be online for like an hour, hour and a half, talk to about 5 of y'all, but it was almost 3 hours instead. And the queue, it was fun, it was cute. I'm pretty sure I'll do it again in the future, don't know when, but I had a lot of fun, and I appreciate all of you who were there, who joined the live, was in a super chat. Y'all made it rain on my birthday. Like, I was literally about 2 ones from feeling obligated to just throw it in a circle for some of the coins I was receiving. It was a lot. Thank you. All right, enough about me. Let's talk about Chris and get in his business. Christopher Dunch was born April 3rd, 1971, making him an Aries, and they receive a lot of heat. So I'm not going to go in and say how he definitely gives Aries energy. I'm not going to point it out. We're going to let the Aries slide. Now, he was born in Montana, but not long after his birth, his family moved to a suburb in Memphis, Tennessee called Cordova. Shout out to the people in Cordova. And child, Memphis has been through a lot this past week, and so I hate to drag them into all of this foolishness today, but he is a product of those Memphis streets, and so we just have to recognize that for what it is. Little Christopher was born to a middle-class family, with his father being a physical therapist and also a Christian missionary, of all things. But you know, it'd be them preachers' children that be the bad ones. And his mother was a school teacher. In total, they have 3 children, that is, of course, including Chris. Unfortunately, there was not a whole lot of information, really none at all, about his childhood and what that was like. However, we do know that after high school, he attends the University of Memphis and then enrolls into the University of Tennessee Health Center with hopes and dreams of becoming one of the best surgeons on his side of the U.S. Now, little Chris does so well in med school that he is allowed to join the prestigious Alpha Omega Medical Honor Society. Now, there were rumors about his drug use, alleged drug use during his 4th year of his residency, all kinds of illegal substances, LSD, cocaine. He was into all of the things, and he was witnessed taking said things on his shift. The girlfriend of his best friend, Jerry Summers, at the time alleged that the 3 of them would go out partying all night, partaking in all kinds of substances, and then at the end of the night, which was technically like the next morning, he would just throw on his lab coat without having any kind of nap, any kind of bath, or coming down off of cloud 9 before heading into work. When the rumors reach up high enough, he is asked to take a drug test, and he refuses to do so. At this point, he could give up on his dreams of becoming this great surgeon, or he could go to this program, the Impaired Physicians Program, and once he completed that, he could then come back and complete his residency. So ultimately, that's what he does. He opts to go to the program, then he comes back, complete the residency after spending 5 years studying neurosurgery and then 1 additional year studying general surgery. By the time he had completed his studies, he had also began dating a woman by the name of Wendy. And the two, over the course of their relationship, have 2 sons. Now, Chris has chosen the field of neurosurgery because of the amount of money that came with it, which he is desperately needing now that he has has all of this debt from medical school. It was well over $500,000 by the time he graduated. In 2010, he and Wendy moved to her hometown of Dallas, Texas, where he is hired at Baylor Regional Medical Center as a spinal surgeon. And with a salary of over $600,000 plus yearly bonuses, Chris is well on his way to being able to take care of all of the debt that came along with medical schooling and being able to buy all of the things, all of the nice things for Miss Wendy. But it is not long before his new coworkers begin to notice that something is not quite right with the new doctor. He will boast and brag all of the time about his skill level, his extensive knowledge of all of the things surgery related, and him pretty much just being that girl when it comes to surgery. But at the same time, little things like the proper use of a scalpel seem to be beyond the doctor's comprehension. And people were noticing that this was not adding up. The math was not mathing. Despite his obvious lack of skill, he is able to convince those around him with his arrogance and boldness that he is in fact one of the best surgeons in the state. Chris has extreme confidence and will make extremely bold claims walking through the halls of the hospitals. Very arrogant statements such as, "Everybody is doing it wrong. I'm the most clean and minimally invasive surgeon in all of the state." And if these things are not problematic enough, he begins an affair with his research assistant, Kimberly. Now, in addition to being a surgeon at the Baylor Regional Medical Center, he is also brought on as a spinal surgeon with the Minimally Invasive Spine Institute, which was separate from Baylor. Unfortunately for Chris, he could not live up to his own personal hype, and he only performs one surgery with the Spinal Institute before he is kicked out of the door. Chris performed a surgery on one of his patients and immediately boarded a flight to Las Vegas to go on vacation without leaving anybody to check on his patient or do any kind of follow-up, nothing. He just was like, "All right, girl, happy healing," and left. And they did not appreciate that at all. So they just went on and let him go. But fortunately for him, he still has his job at Baylor. February 2012, Chris's best friend, Jerry Summers, is having a little back issue. But luckily for him, his best friend is a neurosurgeon. Chris convinces Jerry to allow him to perform the surgery. It was classified as an elective spinal fusion, and so although that is a major surgery, it's allegedly not supposed to be that difficult of a task for Chris. The two of them have been friends since childhood. Jerry completely trusts Chris and is confident in Chris's abilities to perform the surgery correctly, as Chris had told him that it was relatively straightforward and easy. But when Jerry wakes up from this surgery, he is a quadriplegic with incomplete paralysis, meaning that he can still feel pain, but he cannot move from the neck down. Now, as a result of this, Chris has his surgical rights suspended, meaning that, he was still in the hospital, still able to work, but he was not able to perform any surgery, at least not for a couple of weeks. This was only temporary. And his rights are fully reinstated roughly a month later after he passes a drug test and also passes a peer interview. Chris is just asked to refrain from performing such complicated procedures for a little while, and he is assigned his next patient, which is 55-year-old Kelly Martin. Now, Mrs. Martin had fallen down from the attic while assisting her husband bringing down the Christmas decorations. She had slipped and herniated a disc in her back, and this caused her to have chronic back pain, which she was getting tired of. Physical therapy, the prescriptions, none of that was working long term, and she also had a limited movement in her back. And so her doctor recommends that she go see a neurosurgeon to explore the options of permanently correcting and alleviating these side effects from the fall. And of course, the doctor that she ends up making an appointment with is Chris. Now, surgery is a big deal, especially any surgery that you have on your back, like near your spine. And so rightfully so, she has a lot of reservations about having this surgery. She's a little afraid, but Chris reassures her that there is nothing to worry about. What she needs is a relatively routine, common procedure. Basically minor, won't take that long at all to perform, and will completely alleviate her of all of the issues that she's experiencing as a result of her nasty little fall. all. After meeting with Chris, her and her husband both felt really confident in his ability to help them out. They found him to be extremely articulate. He sounded very knowledgeable about all of the things that they had discussed. He answered all of their questions with a lot of confidence, and he just made them feel really comfortable that he was that guy, that he was going to do what needed to be done. But unfortunately, it does not turn out to be so simple of a surgery. 2 hours after the operation begins, Kelly is still in surgery, and this is way past the amount of time that he had told them that the surgery would take. During her surgery, Chris had sliced through an artery and refused to stop the surgery despite the amount of blood that she was losing. There was a trauma surgeon present in the OR who tried to stop him at this point and warn him about the blood loss, as well as the anesthesiologist. They both tried to let him know, like, hey, this is not going well. Maybe you should stop. Maybe you should hand this over, escalate it, because you obviously do not have this under control. But he refused to acknowledge that anything was wrong. Instead, he finishes the surgery. And when Kelly wakes up from her anesthesia, she is screaming and clawing at her legs because she cannot move them. She was so hysterical that the intensive care team had to sedate her. Chris never comes back to check on his patient, even when she codes. He is sitting, writing notes, hears over the speaker that his patient has coded, and he does not budge at all. Sadly, as a result of this botched operation, Mrs. Martin bleeds to death. And finally, after hours of waiting in the waiting room, Kelly's husband and daughters are given the devastating news that she had not made it through the surgery. After this, Baylor issues a review of Chris's practices. And before the review is complete and they can fire him because he already knew what was coming, he decided to resign instead. He knew that had he been fired, they would have been required to report him to the National Practitioners Data Bank, which is set up to flag any problematic physicians. But it is not long before Chris secures his next job. He joins the team at the Dallas Medical Center, where he is granted temporary privileges until the hospital could obtain his records from his previous job at Baylor. And child, before they could even get the records from Baylor, the red flags began to fly. The nurses had noticed that Mr. Chris seemed to be under the influence a lot of the time while he is there on duty. And not only that, he will wear the same set of scrubs for multiple days in a row, like up to 3 days in a row. Very unsanitary, if you think about it. Nevertheless, they allow him to go forward and begin working on patients with his temporary privileges. And his first patient is 63-year-old Flo Brown in July of 2012. During the surgery that is being performed on her vertebrae, Chris severs an artery and he begins packing it with the substance that is intended to stop the bleeding. Now, another surgeon that is overseeing the operation attempts to step in and stop him from causing any further damage, but it was too late. Flo suffers a stroke as a result of what Chris had done to her. Chris then goes home for the night as if he had successfully, saved a life or something, and refuses to respond to messages that he is receiving from the hospital all night long. Instead, he returns to the hospital the following day and schedules an elective surgery on his next patient rather than follow up with the current patient, who is currently in a coma. Now, the hospital urges him to delay the next surgery and focus on Mrs. Brown, who obviously needs his assistance and needs his care. Either that or transfer her out of his care altogether, but he refuses to do that. He's like, no, this is my patient and I will come up with a plan, which he does. Y'all, his plan of action was to drill a hole in her head to alleviate pressure. He said that this will surely help Mrs. Brown's condition. And the hospital said, absolutely not. Absolutely not, sir. We will not approve that at all for multiple reasons. One, you don't have the credentials to be drilling in people's heads, sir. 2, we don't have the tools for you to do so. You don't even have the privileges to do anything like this. And so we cannot approve this. And of course, he knows all of this, but he wanted to do it anyway. And that is literally all that he comes up with as a remedy for her condition. After it is made clear to him that he will not be drilling a hole in this lady, Chris finally completes the transfer that will allow her to be cared for by a different physician and removed from underneath his care. But by this time, it is too late, and Mrs. Brown unfortunately is declared brain dead. Christopher doesn't express any type of remorse, any type of guilt or responsibility for the outcome of what had happened. Instead, he just moves on to the next patient that he had scheduled that elective surgery for and sets his attention on 74-year-old Mary Elford. Mary had come to the Dallas Medical Center for a spinal fusion, and unfortunately, Chris is the doctor that she makes an appointment with. During her procedure, he severs a nerve root while operating on the wrong part of her back altogether. Now, there are colleagues present who are warning him that, sir, what you're doing is not quite right. Some of the team members that are present also speculate that Chris is under the influence of something, and notice that his pupils were completely dilated. Unfortunately, though, none of their concerns are escalated during the surgery so that it could be stopped. And so he just continues to work on this lady, just doing whatever he wants to do. Hours later, Mary wakes up from her surgery in excruciating pain and partially paralyzed. Seasoned long-term spinal surgeon Dr. Robert Henderson is enlisted to perform a second operation to correct the errors made during the first, and he described the things that have been done to her as straight up assault. When he opens her up, he sees that Chris has twisted screws into nerves. There are other screws with severed nerves twisted around them. He had left screw holes in the opposite side of her spine that he wasn't even supposed to be tampering with. Like, he had tried to make screws go in but couldn't, so he just changed his mind, and then now there are these screw holes left behind. He had left surgical hardware inside of tissue, and it was so loose that you could move it with your hand, like just wiggle it around. That is not the worst of it. In the end, he had done all of that and still failed to remove the disc that he went in there to remove. The man had put screws into muscle instead of bone, and I have been to nobody's surgical school. They did not teach me any of the things at Wooddale High School in Memphis, Tennessee. But I know that you put screws into bone and not tissue, my girl. So how do you make this mistake as a classically trained surgeon? Dr. Henderson describes Chris's work as the chaotic equivalent of a child playing with Tinker Toys, like on an operation game. He could not believe that this was the work of an actual real surgeon. At this point, he was convinced that Chris was an imposter doctor altogether. He said that anybody with the basic knowledge of anatomy would not have made the mistakes that Chris made. Like, hello, me? He was so convinced that Chris was not a real doctor that he took it upon himself to check Chris's credentials. He contacted the University of Tennessee to confirm that he had in fact attended and gotten his degree, and then went so far as to contact the supervisor that worked with him during his residency. And that is when he finds out about the incident that led to Chris needing to go to the impaired physicians program. Luckily for the patient, the corrective surgery was somewhat of a success. She was left partially paralyzed, but if it was not for the help of Dr. Henderson, she would have been left completely bedridden for the rest of her life. Even after all of these things, the Dallas Medical Center does not report him or the incident to the National Practitioner Databank, because by law, they are not required to do so for surgeons who have temporary privileges, which is what he had at the time. Because mind you, they're still waiting on his records from Baylor. All of this happened within the first week of him working there. Now, they do, however, fire him. They got him out of there. Chris quickly secures his next position with Southampton Community Hospital, where he performs another 4 botched surgeries. He also takes a job at an outpatient clinic called Legacy Surgery Center, and while there, he performs an operation that goes terribly wrong, leaving this patient without feeling on the entire right side of their body. There's also a patient by the name of Philip at the outpatient surgery center whose spinal cord he drilled into, leaving him paralyzed from the neck down. As for his antics at Southampton, he is set to remove degenerated discs in one of his patients' back. And after this surgery, there was surgical hardware left floating between the patient's spine and muscle. And the patient wakes up in excruciating pain. But Chris convinces him somehow that this is just part of the process. Like, it is surgery, sir. There is a level of pain to be expected. This is all normal. He then prescribes the patient so many painkillers that a local pharmacist refused to fill the prescription. Ultimately, this patient developed a dependency on all of the drugs that Chris was prescribing him. He ended up losing his wife. He lost his job. Like, his life completely spiraled downhill after dealing with Chris and his antics. Jacqueline Troy was another one of the 4 botched operations performed at Southampton. During her procedure, Chris cuts one of her arteries and her vocal cords, and also damages her trachea. She is left barely able to speak above a whisper and had to be sedated for weeks following her operation. Because of the damage done to her trachea, she also had to be fed using feeding tubes exclusively to avoid food getting into her lungs. It was a lot going on. And despite these 2 operations going horribly wrong due to Chris's obvious negligence, Southampton opts to keep him as a part of their team. And then they changed the name from Southampton Hospital to University General Hospital. The worst of the 4 operations performed there was one done on a patient by the name of Jeff Gladwell. Jeff has to undergo an additional 50 operations to correct the things that were done to him while Chris was working on him. During a routine fusion, Chris had mistaken part of Jeff's neck for a tumor, severed one of his vocal cords, put a hole in his esophagus, and sliced an artery. Now, that is not the end, because those 3 things he has done before. Once Jeff begins to hemorrhage, Chris stuffs surgical sponges inside of Jeff's throat to stop the bleeding, then closes his patient with the sponges still there in place, despite the others in the operating room who had advised him not to do so. Like, hey, sir, I don't know if you noticed, but the sponges are still there. And he's like, oh, no, it's fine. Like, don't even worry about that. Now, these sponges cause an infection quickly, and unfortunately, Jeff becomes septic. When they realize that the sponge is in fact the issue here and that it had been left there because nobody in the operating room reported it, Chris refused to return to the operating room to correct the issue. He wanted no parts of the correction of the issue. Instead, yet again, another well-seasoned know what they're doing as surgeon has to step in and correct his errors. Dr. Kirby goes in to remove the sponge, and he is horrified at not just the sponge, but everything else that he sees that Chris had done to this patient. He describes the work of Chris as the work of a crazed maniac. He actually suggested that Chris had tried to kill this man. Like, it was his opinion that this was all done with malice and on purpose. In the end, after the corrective surgery with Dr. Kirby, Jeff is left with only one vocal cord, permanent damage to his esophagus, and partial paralysis on his left side. Now, this botched operation was the final straw for Southampton, or whatever their new name was now, child. They fire him. But he is not only fired. A detailed report put together by Dr. Kirby himself is sent to the Texas Medical Board, branding Chris as a complete sociopath who is a huge threat and danger to the public. Now, with the help of Dr. Henderson, who had cleaned up Chris's previous mess, he and Dr. Kirby put a lot of pressure on the Texas Medical Board to investigate Chris. And finally, in June of 2013, they decide to suspend Chris's license and investigate and to keep him from doing any surgeries in the meantime. Now, once the investigation is complete, which takes about 6 months or so to do, they decide that they are going to revoke his license completely. And after this, Chris's little life just went into a downward spiral, girl. Just everything was happening to Chris. Chris filed for bankruptcy, claiming to be over $1 million in debt. He moves to Denver, Colorado. He is arrested for driving under the influence and is also caught stealing. He is arrested for shoplifting. But honey, that is the least of Lil Chris's problems. In March of 2014, 3 former patients, Mary, Kenneth, and Lee Passmore, who had come to him to resolve back pain, but instead got an intoxicated Chris down in the OR. Baby, at this point, let Chris Brown perform my surgeries, period. I'd rather take my chances in the OR with Chris Brown. In Lee's case, literally as soon as the operation began, the other people in the room noticed that something was terribly wrong, and Chris was doing a lot of the things that were both alarming and unusual. And when the patient began to lose a lot of blood, another surgeon in the OR decides to step in and suggest that he stop because he's not doing it right, especially because he no longer has a clear view of the patient's spine because of the amount of blood, and he is still just in there tinkering around blindly at this point. However, Chris does not take the advice of the other surgeon. Instead, he begins removing parts of the patient's spine and adding supportive hardware in the wrong places. The other surgeon at this point attempts to physically stop Chris from continuing the operation, and afterward refused to enter the OR with him ever again in life. He refused to work with Chris after this. But still, none of the doctors or the nurses or anybody that was present reported what Chris had done. They did not report the altercation between the two surgeons. Just none of it, girl. Just none of the things were reported. It's just everybody left the OR and acted like nothing ever happened. And unfortunately for Lee, because of how the screws had been placed, they could not be corrected. And so he was left with chronic back pain and limited movement for the rest of his life. Now, all 3 of these patients filed separate federal lawsuits against Baylor, alleging that the hospital allowed Chris to perform surgeries despite knowing he was a dangerous physician. And they accused Baylor Hospital of only caring about the $65,000 that they profited off of each of the surgeries that Chris performed. Now, apparently, the necessary requirements to prove malpractice are extremely high and unrealistic in Texas, and it is nearly impossible to prove that the clinic or the physician themselves had any ill intent or intended to harm the patient. And so that was no easy task for them. That was not something that they could really do. But Dr. Henderson and Dr. Kirby are not done with little Chris, okay? After having his license revoked, they did not stop there because they knew that it was possible that he could go somewhere else, get his license reinstated, and be back in the operating room in little to no time. Both of them were completely and 100% convinced that all of these things were done on purpose, that Chris was this crazed psychopath out here doing all of the things intentionally trying to harm his patients, and he needed to be stopped ASAP. They go to the Dallas DA's office to try to have criminal charges brought against Chris. And unfortunately, like I previously stated, because of how hard it is to prove that his intent was to harm these people, it wasn't an easy task, and the inquiry goes nowhere for a couple of years. It is not until 2015 that they begin to make a little headway. An email surfaces that Chris had sent saying, quote, "I am ready to leave the love and kindness and goodness and patience that I mix with everything else that I am and become a cold-blooded killer." Now, they had always made the fact that it's hard to prove intent this huge problem, but here it is in black and white, literally, in an email. After interviewing with dozens of his former colleagues, people who had been in the OR with him, nursing staff, literally everyone, the prosecutors conclude that Chris's actions were in fact criminal and nothing short of imprisonment would do, because he was a danger to the public. The only way to ensure that he would never get the opportunity to operate on a patient ever in life again is to send him to jail. Chris is arrested and charged with 6 counts of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. I guess the deadly weapon was that scalpel or the screwdriver that he was using with these screws. 5 counts of aggravated assault causing injury and 1 count of injury to an elderly person. During his trial, a lot of people who did not speak up during all of the things came forward to talk about it later, which was, I guess, a good thing. Like, come forward now. It's the least you could do, honestly. Credible doctors come forward and testify that the things that Chris had done could have never had been done by mistake by anyone who had gone to medical school. Like, it literally was impossible. Nobody was this dumb, is basically what they were saying. No doctor is this dumb. One of the witnesses came forward and claimed that Chris would come to work at the hospital, have vodka and juice for breakfast, like it was his coffee, and they had witnessed him drinking vodka throughout the day, but only the morning drink would have some orange juice in it. The rest of the drinks throughout the day were just straight up vodka, no chaser, just straight. Even his little mistress Kimberly came forward and testified about the inappropriate things that she had seen taking place while those two had their little rendezvous. If I go to court and one of my exes walk in as a witness for the prosecution, I'm just gonna get up. Try to just take me back to my cell. Just take me on back there and give my people the address where they can write me and send me noodles, because I just already know. She also tells the court about how she had to file for a protective order against him after she had decided to sever their relationship, and he continued to show up at her home, banging on her door, trying to kick it down, knocking on her windows, just doing the most. She let them know that Chris was in fact a very bad boy. And you know the exes are going to always come with the receipts too, because she had emails that she presented to the court where he said, quote, "Anyone close to me thinks that I am something between God, Einstein, and the Antichrist, because I can do anything that I want and cross any discipline boundary like it's a playground and never lose." Sir, this is America. You don't have to be any of those things. You just have to look the way that you do. In February of 2017, Christopher Dunch, aka Dr. Death, which they had coined him by now, is found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment for his actions. During his very, very short career, I believe he was only active as a surgeon for 2 years. He had seen 38 patients. 31 of them were left either permanently paralyzed or severely injured, and 2 of them lost their life. All right, so I asked my natural hair to hold this curl for me, and she did not. Y'all wonder why y'all don't see my natural hair? It's because Miss Mamas doesn't do anything I ask her to do. Okay, nothing. But while we in the cold months, I did say that I was going to try to wear my natural hair more often. So we're going to give this a chance or whatever. Anywho, unfortunately, in February of 2021, Jerry, the best friend of Chris, whom he paralyzed, unfortunately passed away due to an infection which was somehow caused by his quadriplegia. And this meant that Chris could legally be charged now for his friend's death. But Jerry had forgiven his friend, and he had made it very clear before his passing that he did not want Chris to suffer any kind of consequences for what he had done to him. None. Better friend than me, because best friend or not, let me tell you this, hear me, and I know it's hear ye, but I'm saying hear me. If such a situation transpired between my best friend and I, y'all can throw her in some hot fish grease for all I care. And I know that's horrible to say. If it is, I just have to see my girl in hell. Okay? I save a seat. But I guess good on him for, finding forgiveness in his heart, honestly. Now, after his sentencing, he was transferred to O.B. Ellis near Huntsville, Texas, where he currently resides. He will not be eligible for parole until 2045, and he will be 74 years old. The same age Miss Mary was when he did what he had done to her. Y'all's niece, Bella, is getting so big, and the thing is, stop licking the mic, girl. Move it. Her teeth are just doing the weirdest things. So she lost the whole bottom row, minus like the long ones. She lost all of them, girls. They vacated the premises altogether almost a month ago. Why have only 2 of them come back? The top is falling out now. She can barely keep her tongue in her mouth. It just hangs out the front because there's no little teeth. There's no gate to keep it in there. And then she has this one big tooth at the top that has already come in within a matter of like hours of the top row falling out, which really makes me concerned about the bottom because, girl, they've been vacant for weeks. Like, I don't know if this is normal. People keep telling me that it is, but it's like, girl, I don't know. And then that little one that's at the bottom is just as crooked as it can be, girl. It's just in there, just damn near sideways. Now, like I previously briefly touched on at the beginning of the video, there is a TV series about Chris on some network, can't remember, sorry. It is called Dr. Death. There's of course an actor playing him, as well as the two doctors who pretty much single-handedly came through and took Sis down. Dr. Robert Henderson and Dr. Randall Kirby. Now, I did not personally watch the miniseries because that honestly would not have been conducive to my research. It is partly fiction, probably mostly fiction. But now I am kind of interested. And so I might go back and watch if I remember, which I probably won't. I got the attention span of a grapefruit, okay? Y'all, this story was really a lot. It was a wild one. Speaking of watching things, I know I'm hopping all over the place because I'm thinking about telling the story of how this lady almost killed Blue the other day, which will be like his second near-death experience as we've been here. You know what? I'm gonna tell it. But first, speaking of what I've been watching, y'all, I watched The Harder They Fall. This is not a spoiler. FYI, not a spoiler. I watched The Harder They Fall. I'm the type of girl who cannot sit still for longer than about an hour, and my threshold is about an hour and 10 minutes. Around that hour and 9-minute mark, I'm gonna get antsy. I don't like going to the movies for that reason. I will not go if it is over an hour and 20 minutes because I know I just can't girl. I be trying to but I can't. I cannot sit still for that long. And it usually does not matter if the movie is good or not. I don't care. It's just, I can't. It's as if there's an internal timer that goes off that says, girl, we need to get up and move and do some things because this is enough of this. There are countless movies out there that I have started watching and had to come back to later, and a lot of them I never came back to because it's like, if it's not extremely good and I'm not wondering what happened to Diane and I just have to know, I'm not going back and watch. I just won't ever know what happened to Miss Mamas. I'm not going back to watch it. So I knew when I looked at the length of this movie and saw over 2 hours, I was like, oh no, I'm not going to be able to do it. However, now I'd be lying if I said I watched the movie straight through. I did not. I watched it for about close to an hour. Took a break. I said, you know what? I'm gonna go walk my dogs. Took them downstairs. But in the little time that it took me to take them downstairs, walk them around about 30 minutes, I was back to wondering, like, what happened next? What was next? So I went back and finished it. That's unheard of for me. And all I'm gonna say about the movie, besides the fact that it is great and that Regina King's accent is one of the worst accents I've ever heard. Because, girl, what was that? Why did you sound like that? Was she supposed to be country? Like, I still don't have any level of understanding as to why Sis sounded the way that she did. And it's upsetting me and my homegirls over on Instagram who I talked about this with. All I'm going to say is that I am upset, Jim. And that's why I'm upset. And so that I'm going to leave it at that. Because I know some of y'all haven't watched it. And you know what? I'm also need Lakeith Stanfield to play more likable characters. Because at this point, you know how some of these characters get typecast. And in your mind, they can never be a good guy. Like they're always going to be the villain. You can see them playing a missionary down to the church. Passing out hot plates to hungry children and breastfeeding women. And you still won't like them. Lakeith Stanfield is becoming that person for me. The last thing I watched him in was Judas and the Black Messiah. At this point, I don't like him. And he was so likable for those 3 minutes in Get Out. Like, I don't understand. There was even this one day that I found him attractive and thought he was fine. I'm really perplexed as to how we got here. I know how we got here. Judas and the Black Messiah and The Harder They Fall is how we got here. Anyway, it's on Netflix. We all know somebody with an account. Check it out when you get a chance. It really is worth the 2 hours of your life. Now to the story of how Blue almost lost his the other day and how my freedom was almost lost as well. Because y'all know that's my child in my mind. There is this designated dog area in my apartments, and it is gated, of course, to keep the dogs from running in and out, girl, and into the street. Now, right next to it is a driveway, and then once you get to the end of the driveway, there's a busy street, and then there's a little piece of highway. It's a little piece of highway. So I'm already there with Blue and Bella. This lady comes up with 2 big dogs. Y'all see my dog size. They're not big dogs. Now this lady is coming with these 2 big dogs. And my dogs get excited when they see new dogs. They bark, but it's like a friendly bark. Like they want to play. They get so excited. Not aggressive at all. So she asks, are they friendly? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, so these are friendly barks? I'm like, yes, they are. They just get excited. I'm trying to explain that to her. So I'm like, it's fine for you to bring them in. Like they'll play. She comes in and I pick Bella up because Bella, we're working on her social skills. She will not just do the regular, let me sniff your butt and you sniff mine. She wants to jump all on the dog and sniff like crazy. You know, giving puppy energy. You know what they give. So I didn't want her her to do that to the ladies' dogs right away. I wanted them to get in and then slowly, you know, I hold her back and just introduce her. That's what's going on. So once Bella feels like she's gonna calm down and act like she got some sense, I put her down on the ground and she goes jumping up on the ladies' dogs. The dogs are acting afraid, even though Bella is just so tiny, but the dogs are spooked a little bit by Bella's presence. And so she is like, I'll just leave. And I'm like, you don't have to leave, I'll leave. But she's like, no, I'll leave. So I guess she was annoyed by Bella jumping up on her dog. She goes out of the gate and leaves it open. Does not close it behind her. Blue sees her leaving with the dogs, bolts out of the gate. Bella runs out of the gate. I'm just one person with two dogs. I grab Bella first because she has the least sense of the two. Put her back inside of the park, secure the gate. Meanwhile, this woman is walking toward the street and Blue is following her and her dog. And she's like, oh no, he's following me. And I'm like, UDA. For one, common courtesy is to make sure the gate is closed behind me to keep other people's dogs from running out and getting hit by a car. Now, if I fail to do so, and I notice that your dog is following me and my dogs, I'm not going to walk toward the street. I'm going to come back toward you so you can get your dog safely. She is steadily walking. Then here comes a car. She still does not turn around. I'm like calling Blue's name. He is ignoring me because he is so excited about all of the things going on around him. Little does he know he about to lose his damn life. And she is yelling for the car, stop. And I'm like, are you dumb? You stop. Both of y'all stop. Somebody stop. The car zooms past them and damn near hits my dog and she is screaming her head off. I'm yelling because I'm thinking my dog is about to be hit by a car. And then somehow I'm going to end up with a mugshot today. Finally, I catch up to them. So her screaming, my yelling, and the car scared Blue. His ears go back. He looks at me and his eyes are huge and I can tell he's afraid and nervous. So I'm like, sit, Blue. And he sits down, but he is so terrified at this point that he just completely just lays down on his side in the street. Like, he just fucking plays dead at this point. And I get to him, I put the leash on him and walk him back to the dog park. Get Bella, who is in there looking like a crazed maniac, but she always looks like that. And I'm just pissed off at this point because all of this happened and none of it had to. And it's just like, girl, did you do that on purpose? Like, was that an on purpose thing? Because I'm kind of getting the vibes that that was on purpose. I just don't believe that somebody is just that mentally absent. Like, I don't know, am I reaching? That definitely felt very purposeful. It honestly just irritates me to think about. And I just know, had my baby been hurt, it just would have been really bad, honestly and truly. Y'all, Charlotte Tilbury, shout out to them because they hooked mother up. They sent me a couple of very cute products. A couple of them I have used in today's video. Y'all see that mess taking place in the back? Maybe you can't because I got a dark back there. Bella is in Blue's bed, sucking on Blue's teddy bear, and she has picked up the habit from him. Anyway, on a lighter note, on the subject of the dog park, we met this adorable little Shih Tzu named George who uses the buttons. Shout out to George, who will never see this video probably. My dogs love him. He loves my dogs. Well, Blue doesn't care for George, but he's not mean to him. He just ignores him. And I think it's because George is a puppy. He literally just acts like George does not exist. And George tries his best to initiate play with Blue, and Blue just walks around him like he's not even there. But I think I know what it is. I think Blue is feeling away because George uses the buttons. He is being trained on the like word buttons. If you've seen it on TikTok, because I didn't see it before the owner was talking to me about it. I think my phone is spying on me, y'all. I'm telling you. Because me and the owner talked about it. I never heard of this, had never seen it. And then next thing I know, I open up TikTok and it's being shown to me, this husky communicating full sentences with these buttons. And I'm like, wait a minute, baby. What's going on here? But anyway, George knows outside and hungry, and that is just too cute. But we are not going to attempt to do the buttons in my household because I already feel like my dogs just talk too much and they don't talk at all. But if you follow me on Instagram, you see what Blue gives. You've seen his personality. He is very expressive without saying a word. It's like the looks, the eye rolls, all of the things that he gives and does. It's as if he's talking all day and does not hush. Bella is the same way with her little personality. No. And then I already know them. Like all day they would be pressing hungry, 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 hungry. hungry, and I just ain't got time for it in my life, honestly. They would abuse the hungry button, probably the outside button. And all day, if they had their way, I would just be feeding them and taking them in and out, in and out, in and out, and feeding them. So we're not doing that. But I thought it was very cool and very cute. And I'm starting to think that Blue hearing me gush over George, how cute he is and smart he is and how cool the buttons are, got him feeling a little way, got him feeling a little jealous. And so now he does not have any time or anything for little George when we see him. But anywho, that is it for this video. I have given y'all a mini life update on my children because I know a lot of y'all don't have Instagram or don't follow me there, and y'all like to hear about the shenanigans of Blue and Bella. And so there you have it. Y'all don't forget to like the video before you leave. Subscribe if you have not. As always, I want to know your thoughts down below, and I appreciate you so much for spending your time with me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Peace. All right, so Christopher Dunch, I hate his last name with a passion. Like, I literally hate to say it. It's just so unnecessary. Who put those letters together and decide we're gonna make this the last name? Like, and why? Irritates my soul. If he was born April 3rd, I'm pretty sure he's an Aries, but let's just fact check that because Mother is wrong sometimes. And Mother is not wrong this time. He is an Aries. You know what? Also, really quick, spending 5 years studying neurosurgery and then another year stuttering, girl. Now Chris had, what's the word? Now, in addition to being a surgeon at the instead, he just moves on to the next page. So how do you make this mistake as a classically trained surgeon? Is classically trained just for like dancers? I don't know. Who had become, girl, that they begin to make a little headway. Is that the word? I think so. You know, their little rendezvous. Girl, what? Now I'm not sure which one of those was wrong. Rendezvous. 31 of them are left permanently paralyzed. Why do I keep saying per? 31 of them were left either paralyzed. Oh my gosh. See, you just get up here and you do too much. You didn't knock my little thing off. Designated for the dogs. We refer to it as, the dog park. It's this little gated area. I was out of focus. Y'all didn't even say nothing.